Hey guys, Sean here, and welcome to the F1 Word for Sunday Live, what is actually, by name only, the last Sunday Live. Don't worry, we'll still be streaming every Sunday, but it'll have a new name from next week. Those are regular followers of the channel will probably know what that's going to be, and about time too as well, I should say. Hello to everyone in chat, and a happy Easter to all those that celebrate. It's been a day of way too much chocolate for me, so I'm a little bit hyperactive, which doesn't bode well for this one. We're going to be hopping in today to talk a little bit about Red Bull and their future beyond, 2019 and beyond, as the thumbnail says there, because of course, big decisions to make over the next 4 or 5 weeks for them, really, with the May deadline looming large for that engine call. So it's a big few weeks. We're going to hop straight into this. Before I do say any more, actually, John T will not be with me for this stream. However, provided everything goes as planned, he will be back with us next Sunday, so we'll get some kind of fanfare or something set up for then. However, for now, it is just going to be me and Chaz, and I'm going to say hello to Chaz.
Yep, hello Sean, and also hello everyone watching as well.
How we doing, mate? Have you had a good week?
Yeah, I've had some rest after the just such a busy last weekend. So yeah, I'm bloody hell, I can't even speak. I'm recovering well.
That is a positive start to today's live stream. Apparently Chaz doesn't English today, so but we'll get through it, mate. It's an interesting few weeks because obviously the back end of last year, Renault were rumoured to have come out and pretty much said we're not going to stick with Red Bull for 2019. We're going to end a contract at the end of 2018. But what's quite interesting then is they came out and said, well, actually, we're going to give you a May deadline, which means really we're looking at 4 or 5 weeks before that decision's got to be made.
Yeah, I'm quite baffled, honestly, by Renault's decision. I think after when McLaren announced they were going to go with Renault power from, I think it was Singapore, they announced that, I thought it was going to be automatic that Renault were going to drop Red Bull, because after some of the things that Red Bull have done to Renault since 2014, I just didn't see how that relationship could continue. So I just don't see Red Bull continuing with Renault after what's happened.
It's an odd one, isn't it? Because they spent pretty much, since the hybrid era, they've basically done nothing but, moan about them really quite publicly and drag them through the mud a little bit. And of course, you know, that's come across now as bad PR for Renault. And that's why when all these rumours came out towards the end of last year, I thought, well, that's it then. They've got the control, they've got the power, they've kind of given the finger, if you like, to Red Bull in an act of not revenge, but you know what I mean, sort of like, well, do you know what, you don't like us, we don't want to work with you anymore. But I don't know, it's quite an odd one. I mean, if Renault did decide not to stick with them and didn't give them the May deadline, the only option Red Bull have would be Honda. And even if they don't want Honda, if they stay in F1 based on the rules, it would be tough because obviously Honda supply the least number of teams. But the reason I kind of want to talk about this now is obviously we're into April, just a few weeks away from them having to make that decision. But also because of what's happened in Australia with Honda, we were all, as we said at the time, a little bit duped, weren't we, in testing by how good they looked. And it turns out that they still have some reliability issues when it gets hot, but also they don't look particularly quick either, Chaz.
No, in terms of power, I don't think they've improved compared to even Renault. I think reliability has improved, but it's still not at a level where Red Bull can say, right, we're fully committed 100% to taking those power units for 2019 up to 2021.
It's a big commitment to make, isn't it? If they don't see any kind of progress, if you like, from Honda. I mean, we have to be honest. We know that this current Honda engine in the back of the Toro Rosso is an upgraded version of the 2017 one, and we haven't got the brand new engine yet. But based on past performances, when Honda do bring a new engine, it doesn't always work out to be any better anyway, to be honest, does it? But I think for me, I've always felt like this deal, once Toro Rosso announced they were going to Honda, I thought this deal between Red Bull and Honda was all done and dusted in almost like a penciled in contract, sort of with performance clauses. You know, if your engine's terrible, we will not sign with you. But if they're not careful, Red Bull, they're going to end up in a corner where whatever Honda have, they're going to have to take or walk away from the sport.
I think the only way they could get out of this is if they allowed Honda to buy Toro Rosso as a team and just form a Honda Works team. And I think right now, over the next month or so, I think Red Bull will be taking a serious look at that Honda engine and be thinking, can we seriously go with this for 3 seasons and seriously challenge for race victories? I don't think they can right now if they were to go with Honda power.
This is the thing, the other thing as well around Honda's reliability, even if they manage to build an engine that's capable of being reliable, are Red Bull also going to be willing to abandon their tradition, if you like, for want of a better term, their philosophy, if you like, of a tight packaged rear end? Because you could not put a Honda engine, based on what we know so far, in the back of that Red Bull, because it wouldn't make it through one Grand Prix, let alone, 7 that it's got to do.
Yeah, there's no chance. If the Honda was in the Red Bull now, I wouldn't be surprised if in Australia both cars had retired if they had the Honda. It's difficult because Christian Horner and the people at Red Bull have given Adrian Newey a lot of freedom with the way he designs the Red Bull, but it puts a lot of strain on whatever engine is in the back of that car, even for the Renault. And I think if the Honda was in the back of that car and it was still very tightly packaged at the rear, I don't see how they can realistically have a reliable car.
Well, no, and if Honda was struggling in the heat of Australia, then can we just assume Toro Rosso will not get to the end of the Bahrain Grand Prix then? Because that's the desert. It's going to be a damn sight hotter than Australia got. So, it doesn't look good at the minute. They don't look quick. There are still reliability issues. We have to give Honda some credit. They do, at present, look more reliable than they did a year ago, but we've only had testing to go off, a very cold testing, and one race, of course. But something that sort of, I guess, raised an eyebrow with me. I was a little bit intrigued by this. Obviously, Renault have come out and said, we want the engines frozen for 2019 and 2020 so we can focus on 2021 and nobody gets a huge advantage. Makes sense on paper. I'm going to come on to that a little bit more in a bit, but it makes sense on paper. But then Red Bull have come out and kind of back to that call. Is that almost, can we read too much into that? It almost feels to me like a united front, which could see Red Bull and Renault sort of sign up to each other again for a couple more years.
I think if Red Bull are seriously committing to freezing the engine development for 2 seasons, then I think that's probably a sign they're going to stay with Renault, because why would they go with Honda and then freeze the engine development for 2 seasons? Because the Honda isn't going to be better than the Renault probably even next year. So that would make no sense if they are committing to freezing the engine development and then they go to Honda, who have the slowest power unit. It would make no sense.
That's it. That Honda is never going to get anywhere near Mercedes or Ferrari. I don't believe the Renault will by 2021. I think the running order in terms of engines that we have now is Mercedes, Ferrari, Renault, Honda. I don't see that changing before the rules reset because, teams, even if they say no to engine freezing, teams will continue to develop and they'll cancel each other's developments. Like Renault will close the gap to Ferrari and Mercedes, and Honda probably or possibly will close the gap to Renault, but they're not going to overtake them, like you said there, Chaz. And that's a huge gamble to kind of commit to a Honda tie-in for 2 years. One, if they commit to the engine freeze, which means that engine can't get developed. But two, if Honda don't improve and don't get the return thereafter, what if they disappear at the end of 2020? Then what do Red Bull do? Because Renault won't take them back. I mean, they might have to if there are no other people in the sport, but, and Mercedes aren't going to supply them, Ferrari aren't going to supply them, so I think it'd be crazy to, as of right now, it'd be crazy to go with Honda. They might turn up to Bahrain, Chaz, as unlikely as it is, and surprise us all, Honda, but I think they'd be crazy not to stick with Renault right now.
I think they have to stick with Renault until, I'd say, sign a new contract until the end of 2020, and then by end of 2019, start of 2020, then you can start looking at who your next engine supplier is going to be in the new era of Formula One after 2021. That'd be the smart thing for Red Bull to do.
See, they're talking engine freeze, but in terms of the smart thing to do, for me, Red Bull want to be saying, no, we don't want an engine freeze, so that any potential new partner, say, if, and I don't think they will, not as an independent or on their own anyway, if Aston Martin were to come in and build an engine, or Cosworth or Porsche or whoever, the last thing Red Bull want is a potential new engine partner to be restricted. Do you know what I mean? They want to make sure that, although they'd be outside the rules anyway, so I guess they could, that's kind of a pointless point there, Sean, but yeah, they don't want any kind of restriction on development once that team come in 2021, and they don't really want, it's really what I can't get my head around is Mercedes and Ferrari, in the sense that when I look at this engine freeze, this is why I said it works well on paper. If they freeze engines on paper, Renault and Honda have the same thing that they have. They're stuck with it to 2021. Mercedes and Ferrari can't gain an advantage. However, whilst Renault and Honda are developing their brand new engine for 2021, Ferrari and Mercedes are doing exactly the same, and so far, just, I don't know, building on what they already have. Do you know what I'm trying to say? If you halt engine development for Renault and Honda, you also do it for Mercedes and Ferrari. So to me, that cancels out freezing of the engines. Does that make sense? Probably not.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think your point about, if for Renault and Honda, the reason Renault particularly want a engine freeze is because they can focus all money and resource onto 2021. But as you said, so can Mercedes, so can Ferrari, and so can any other engine supplier that wants to come into Formula One in 2021. So there's pros and cons. There's lots of things to decide through at this current point.
I mean, we often get asked it during live streams anyway, Chaz, don't we, about, potential new entrants for 2021. Is there anybody you are fairly confident will join the sport if, of course, the regulations that get presented to teams on Friday are what new manufacturers might want to see?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, Aston Martin is a possibility. I think one I'm starting to be confident with in terms of them entering is Maserati.
Yeah.
I think Haas will be keen to make a deal with them, because if Haas want to push on and win races potentially, I don't see how it's going to happen with a Ferrari engine, because I don't see how Ferrari would allow that.
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is Maserati are an extension of Ferrari, aren't they, if you like? They're part of that company. But then, who knows? I'd love to see them do a Chevy deal. It's what I'd love to see for Haas, a big American tie-in. But a lot of people talk about Aston Martin, and there are a lot of people that say they will. But from what I know of Aston Martin and how they handle their business and financially, I don't think they'd be able to afford to do it. They might be able to say, I think we're in a position where Cosworth and Aston Martin would be great to come into Formula One, but I don't think either can really afford to do it. So I think it's more likely that they'll come to an agreement together. I can't see either coming in on their own, because I don't think financially they can do it.
Yeah, I think financially it wouldn't be smart. And yeah, it makes sense if they both joined up and supplied just one team to start with. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, possibly a Red Bull. I mean, that'd be good for them, a works deal. But in terms of sort of getting back to now, though, and the options available to Red Bull, it is just Renault and Honda. And if they decide not to go with Renault, it is Honda whether they like it or not, because Mercedes have already said they won't supply them because they don't. They say because they don't want to be essentially slagged off in the media everywhere, and it's not good for their PR. Truth is, because they know you put a Mercedes engine at Red Bull, it's probably going to win the championships. Ferrari, I can't see that happening. I just can't see it. I don't know why. It bugs me, but I just don't ever see Ferrari and Red Bull working together again, which means if they say no to Renault and Honda, they have two choices. They either walk away from the sport, or they accept the fact that the Honda engine will effectively be allocated to them whether they like it or not. They're their two options, because as far as I'm aware, unless this has changed in the last week or so, our rules change in F1 left, right and centre, but I don't think it's changed. But basically the manufacturer that supply the least teams on the grid have to supply a team if they don't have an engine. So that means that if they say no to Renault, it's leave or Honda. And I don't think that's good for Red Bull. I really don't.
Yeah, I think the smart thing right now would be to stay with Renault, because they're basically just going to give away 2 seasons of potential wins. I mean, yeah, they might not win a championship with a Renault power unit, but would they rather win races and not win a championship, or be in the position McLaren have been for 3 seasons, 2015, 16 and 17?
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's like you said, I think Renault's best chance of winning a championship is with Red Bull. That's not against the works team. That's not against McLaren. I just think with Adrian Newey on board, the way they design their cars, that's their best shot at a title. But I still don't see them winning a championship at Red Bull before 2021. And like you say, surely it's better to be picking up the wins and the podiums and at least be competitive towards the front end of the grid than spend 2 years trundling around at the back like McLaren have had to endure for the last 3 seasons. It's not good for PR, and Red Bull are all about that. And I can't see Red Bull's owner, based on what we had over the last couple of years, and if we're not competitive, we don't want to be in Formula One. They take a Honda engine. It's a gamble. I don't care what they say. They're going to come out and say, oh yeah, we've been to the Honda factory, we were really impressed, or oh yeah, Honda are great and fantastic. Of course they're going to say that. They have to. They can't come out and say, no, Honda are crap, we don't want them. Oh no, we've got them. I don't. They can see what they want at the Honda factory. It's not until that gets on track that we're going to see what it can really do. I just think it's too much of a gamble.
Yeah, I think it is. And didn't Fernando Alonso say the same, that what he saw at the Honda factory was incredible or something like that?
Oh, Alonso and McLaren spent the last 3 winters, haven't they, saying how good Honda are going to be and we're going to turn this around, and it just hasn't happened. And that's not McLaren's fault. That's not going to be Red Bull's fault if they end up with them. It won't be Toro Rosso's fault this season. There's only one group of people to blame, and that's those at Honda that are producing this engine that just isn't good enough. It just isn't.
Yeah, and I will say with Honda, I just can't believe they can't get it right, because they're a big company. It's not like they're Cosworth, who, yes, they are decent at designing engines, but they're not Honda in terms of the size and how much money they have. And the amount of money that Honda have put into this project, I think it's over $1 billion. And I'm sorry, it's just not good enough. And I think if we get to 2020 and Honda are in a similar position, if I was the boss of Honda, I'd pull the plug on Formula One. I'll pull the plug on them being in Formula One, because it's just going to be a waste of time and a waste of money.
I could see, honestly, it might sound a bit odd at this point, but if Red Bull say, actually, no, we don't want to, we're going to stick with Renault for another 2 years, I wouldn't be surprised if Honda haven't got their act together to see them pull out at the end of this year. Why trundle around with Toro Rosso at the back for 2 years? If you've got a promise of being with Red Bull, you may as well stick around. But if you haven't got that, why drive around at the back for 2 years to then end up having to pull out anyway because you either don't want the 2021 regs the way they are, or you're not performing? I just think it's a waste of time and a waste of, like you say, money. The money they've poured in is absolutely ridiculous. So could they pull out at the end of this year, or do you think they will stick around till the end of 2020 at least?
You know what? After you just said that about Red Bull sticking with Renault, I think that's a real possibility, because Toro Rosso, they're never really going to be allowed to be successful, because obviously Red Bull are a lot bigger, they have a lot better car. So it's a no-win situation for Honda if Red Bull stick with Renault. So I think it's a possibility.
It's F1. We'll quote Murray Walker. Everyone's been doing it lately, actually. Anything is possible in Formula One, so we don't know. One thing that I think this next 4 weeks is definitely going to go a long way to deciding is Daniel Ricciardo's future. He's out of contract at the end of this season, and there's a lot of people talking about him going to Mercedes or Ferrari. Many seem to think he'll stay at Red Bull. I think it'd be weird seeing him in another car, and I'd love to see him stay at Red Bull, because whether people maybe in comments don't, they don't agree with me or don't like what I say, but I think as a whole, that is the best driver lineup on the grid. And I think they'd be crazy, absolutely crazy, not to tie him down to a contract. But if you're Ricciardo, regardless of what Red Bull say they've seen at the Honda factory, if they sign a 2-year deal with Honda, do you really want to take that gamble as a driver when you think he's 28 as well? So he's not sort of a really young driver. Verstappen can afford to take that gamble. He's not going to lose. He's not coming towards the peak by a long way, which is quite terrifying when you think about it. But Daniel Ricciardo, 28 years old, does he want to gamble 2 years of his career away, like Fernando Alonso did, by sticking with a Honda-powered car?
No, I don't think he would. I think he would rather be Sebastian Vettel's number 2 at Ferrari than drive a midfield car, honestly. I just don't see it happening, because he's not going to gain anything. He's not probably ever going to score a podium for that 2 years. And again, just like Alonso, he'd waste 2 years of his career.
I can't see it if they sign with Honda. I mean, if they stick with Renault, he may as well, because his options aren't, huge. I think any team would be improved by having Ricciardo on their books, if you like. Ferrari, I think the Ferrari thing, it's an option for him, but I actually think, in a way, the opposite to you, Chaz, in that, not really the opposite. If it's the Honda engine, I think I'd rather be in a Ferrari, because at least you're going to win some races, even if you are a number 2 there. But I think that contract it all comes down to what Ferrari offer. If Ferrari say, you will play number 2, he'll say, no, you're all right, I'm off. I'll go somewhere else, or I'll stick where I am, or I'll try another team. Possibly, if Red Bull go with Honda, Renault works team, back to Renault, so that's always possible. I think right now he's more likely to either stay at Red Bull or go to Mercedes.
I think if Red Bull stay with Renault Power for 2019 and 2020, I think it's probably likely he's going to stay at Red Bull. But when it comes to the other teams, I think Mercedes is likely. I'm not quite sure if he'd fit in there. I don't know why. I don't think he'd go to McLaren. I don't think he'd go to Ferrari if Red Bull still have Renault Power. But the one team I do see him going to, especially since Verstappen has basically been given the number 1 status at Red Bull, is the Renault Works team. Because since 2016, they have improved so much. And they have Carlos Sainz there. So if Ricciardo does go there and, say, replaces Hülkenberg, then he's going to have a teammate that's going to push him, and that car is going to develop. And I think Renault said that by 2019 or 2020, they want to be going for race wins. And if they do achieve that, then Ricciardo's going to be in a good position if he goes to the Renault Works team. So I think that is a very, very possible option.
I keep kind of putting out there the possibility that Ricciardo goes to Mercedes and Bottas goes to Ferrari to replace Raikkonen, because people will talk about Leclerc all they want, and he's a fantastic young man, and he was brilliant in Australia given the car he's got, and he will do well in Formula One, but he's too young for Ferrari. They're not going to take him next year. So I could see a Bottas ending up there, maybe a Hülkenberg to Ferrari, which opens up that seat at Renault. Chaz, that you were just talking about there. Who knows? It's a possibility. He's quite a tall guy, so that might put them off him. But I think the options for me are Ferrari if it's not as number 2, Mercedes alongside Lewis Hamilton. I can't see McLaren. I genuinely can't see it. Renault or stay at Red Bull. But it all comes down to the engine decision. If they stick with Renault, why go to the Renault Works team, which right now and probably for the next 2 years is going to be behind Red Bull, and why go to McLaren, who, although I think they will close the gap to Red Bull. I don't doubt that for a second. I don't think they're going to overtake them. I don't think they'll pass them in the championship. So why take, in terms of performance and only in performance, a step down, if you like, to Renault or McLaren? So it is all down to that engine decision, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah. Red Bull hold the key for Daniel Ricciardo. If they go with Honda, I don't see how Daniel Ricciardo stays at Red Bull. But as I said, if they stay with Renault Power, I don't see why Ricciardo would leave Red Bull. I think the way Red Bull run their team just suits his personality, and it gets the best out of him. I think at a team that's more strict, like a Ferrari and Mercedes, I don't think he would do as well, because he wouldn't be able to be himself like he is at Red Bull. So, as I said, Red Bull do hold the key.
I keep saying it. It's the next 4 or 5 weeks are going to be huge for Red Bull. I mean, obviously, the blueprint for 2021 is delivered on Friday to the team, so that's going to be quite big for Formula One as a whole. But Red Bull have got quite a lot to decide, and I guess they can't really make a decision until they know what that blueprint is, because they might suddenly get approached by 3 or 4 manufacturers that say, yeah, we'd like to build that engine for you. So, I don't know. Carlos Sainz is one that intrigues me. I think he's got quite a part to play in this to an extent as well, because I don't think he will go to Red Bull. I know he's on loan at Renault, but I think he'll buy himself out that contract, a bit like Jenson Button did many years ago now, which makes me feel really old. Bought himself out of that Williams deal, didn't he, to stay at BAR that became Honda. And I think Carlos Sainz will do the same, because if I were Carlos Sainz, I'd look at Red Bull and say, well, I wasn't good enough when you needed somebody last time, so why am I suddenly good enough now? And he's in a works team. That's one hell of a position to have, with 2021 looming large, a date that we're going to be saying a lot over the next 12 months, I'm sure, or the next 2 years at least. But with that looming large, I'd want to be at a works team. I'd want to be at a Mercedes, a Ferrari, or a Renault, because they're ultimately going to have quite an advantage over their customer teams, because everything's going to be integrated together and they're going to have that development and control over everything. And I think that's the right place to be. So if I were Ricciardo, I would seriously give that some thought, whatever Red Bull decide in terms of an engine. Renault could be a very viable option for him.
Yeah, I think with Sainz, I think staying with Renault would be better because I think Renault have more potential to improve than Red Bull. I mean, yes, I know that Renault are behind Red Bull right now, but I think Renault, because they're a works team, they have more potential as a team than Red Bull do because they're limited by whoever is supplying them in terms of power. And also, you got to think as well, is his hero, Fernando Alonso, built Renault into a championship contender and a championship winner. And
Yeah.
I think he wants to do the same. And I wouldn't be surprised if Renault got their act together after 2021. I wouldn't be surprised if Sainz starts going for world championships after 2021.
Yeah. It'd be wrong to talk about Red Bull's engine decision, if you like, without mentioning Max Verstappen. He is effectively their number one driver. They've come out and said that they want to build a team around him long term. Do you think, because I go back and forth on this, do you think there's a clause in that contract regarding Honda? Because although he's young and that's a hell of a gamble to take, with so many seats opening up around him, it could potentially still be a gamble for him if it turns out Honda are dire this year and don't look as though they're going to improve next year, for him to spend the next 2 years trundling around at the back in a Red Bull Honda.
There definitely has to be a clause in that contract to do with if the engine isn't performing. I think, again, if they keep Renault power, I don't see Verstappen going anywhere until 2021 at the earliest. But if they get the Honda, then I wouldn't be surprised if he gets out of that contract and becomes available for 2020, potentially for a Ferrari or even a Renault, even the Renault Works team, if they become, really competitive. So again, Red Bull hold the key. Red Bull, when it comes to deciding in terms of what engines they're going to be using, is not only is it going to decide their race results going in for the future, it's also going to decide the future careers of their two current race drivers.
I was just going to say, do you think Red Bull could end up in a position where they lose both their drivers at the end of this year if they switch to Honda?
Not at the end of this year. I think Ricciardo, if they switch to Honda, I think Ricciardo will go. If Verstappen is really unhappy, then I think he'll go at the end of the year, but I think he may give it a year. And then if it's, not good enough, then he'll say by mid-season, just say, yeah, I'm out. I'm not going to stay here any longer. And then he'll become available for 2020.
Kind of like, I'm going to give Honda a chance because I'm still young, and because it could go either way, couldn't it? They could rock up with an engine that's as good as Renault in 2020 or even better, and all of a sudden Red Bull look like geniuses and Max Verstappen's made a brilliant call. I guess, like we said earlier, it comes down to the fact he's young enough to take that chance, isn't he? Whereas Daniel Ricciardo, he's got to get this next move right if he wants to win that world championship. I think he's one of those drivers, I've said it before, he's too good to be a number two. And although there are some that don't really rate him very highly, I think he's one of those drivers that if he doesn't win a world championship, I'd see that as a little bit of a travesty almost if he doesn't take a title from Formula One, because one, he's a very nice guy, and two, he's a bloody good racing driver.
Yeah, he is a very good driver, but I wouldn't say it's a travesty because he hasn't really had a chance to go for a championship. And yes, of course, that is because of the car, but I don't know. I get like you, he's too good to be a number two, but I don't think he's good enough to be a number one for a team, for like a Red Bull or a Mercedes or Ferrari. So I think he definitely needs to get himself in a car which can win sooner for him, because he's probably going to retire, I'd say, in the next, probably 4 or 5 years' time, because people forget he's actually older, a lot older than people think he is, because I think he entered F1 when he was, 24, 23?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's a lot older than people think, and yeah, again, it's all down to Red Bull.
Yeah, they've got, it'll just be like a domino effect, won't it? They'll make the call and then everything will just either tumble or build up around them. But I have to say, business head on for a second here. In terms of PR, Hamilton and Ricciardo at Mercedes would be an absolute dream. It would be an absolute dream for them. They've got brand Hamilton and they've got the really likeable Daniel Ricciardo. I'm not going to write that possibility off. For some reason, when I look at Daniel Ricciardo, I don't see him in a silver Mercedes suit, but at the same time, I think that would be a great move for him, and it would be a really good move for Mercedes. And the chances of him doing a Rosberg and upsetting Hamilton is also very slim, so there might be a bit of harmony in that team as well. So, yeah, I think both parties could do a hell of a lot worse, to be perfectly frank with that one. Yeah, I don't know. We're going to see with Ricciardo. I'm like you. I think Verstappen will stick around next year. I mean, he might walk away this year, but he's young enough to give them that chance, isn't he? So I think that's all we can really say on those two. Carlos Sainz, we've mentioned there, he's part of that Red Bull family. What about him for that second Ferrari seat?
I don't see it. I only see him going to Ferrari if he's the number one. I don't see him playing number two. I think it'd be a lot better if he stayed at Renault because, as I said, Renault are improving a lot year on year, and I think that'd be the smartest thing to do right now. Is just stay at Renault and see what they can come up with the next regulation change.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think as well, he might be a bit much for Sebastian Vettel, not in terms of talent, but in terms of if Ricciardo went to Ferrari, they're going to get on, because even though Ricciardo beat Vettel in 2014, they did get on very well. There'd be harmony there, and I don't know if you get that with Carlos Sainz and Sebastian Vettel. I'm not saying Carlos Sainz is a horrible person or anything like that at all. I don't know. It's just a feeling that I have. I think if you're looking at a Renault driver at Ferrari, possibly Hülkenberg, but I'm also going to say, as much as I get laughed at for these next two names, on that Ferrari seat, I know I've wandered off from Red Bull for a second, but on that Ferrari seat, don't write off Perez and don't write off Grosjean.
I don't think that's ridiculous. I think even though Perez did have some trouble with his teammate last year, I think Perez would work as a absolute number two, because then he would know his job, and I think he would be very good in that role. And I think Grosjean would also be good in that role. And if Ferrari are looking for a driver that can be faster than Kimi and push Vettel more, all they have to do is look at 2012 and 2013 and what Grosjean did in qualifying. And yes, I know that Raikkonen was a lot better in the races, but in terms of out-and-out speed, Grosjean was faster than Raikkonen.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the obvious thing when you look at the domino effect, if you like, in terms of Ferrari, is to see Grosjean go to Ferrari and Leclerc get that promotion to Haas, if you like, which right now would look like a bloody good promotion, to be honest, wouldn't it? Not bad at all. And then maybe another Ferrari Junior. Maybe is Fuoco still a Ferrari Junior?
Yeah.
Yeah, pop somebody like that in there would be maybe in the Sauber. So it would be an obvious one. I don't think Grosjean would do too bad in a Ferrari, or Perez for that matter, to be honest. But yeah, that's one for another day. Let's pop in for a prediction then, Chaz. What power unit are Red Bull going to be running in 2019 and why?
They will go with Renault for 2019 and 2020 because they will not want to give up the possibility of race wins and podiums, and they will not want to be in a similar position to what McLaren were in 2015, 16 and 17.
Yeah, I think the next three races are key as well in the decision. If Honda don't get it together, I think they're going to have to stick with Renault because, they can turn around and say, we've been to the factory and the 2019 engine looks great on the dyno, but that's one thing. Getting it on track, as we've seen in the past, is a completely different thing. So I'm not going to say Honda. I'd agree with you. I think Renault, if for no other reason, then it's just the no-brainer decision to make. And the other one then, where's Daniel Ricciardo going to go, mate, and why?
Daniel Ricciardo will stay at Red Bull because it's easier, I think, for him to stay at Red Bull, and because Red Bull, in my opinion, will continue with Renault power, even if the Mercedes seat becomes available, I'm not entirely sure that Mercedes will take him over a younger driver such as Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, I think you look at Mercedes. Well, you look at Mercedes. Maybe they'd be more likely to put a youngster in, but they went with Bottas over Wehrlein, I suppose. So there is the possibility if he's going to go to another team in terms of ahead of Red Bull, I think it would be Mercedes. I don't see him going to be number 2 at Ferrari. But I'm with you. If they stick with Renault, he's definitely going to be at Red Bull next season. But for some reason, if they go with Honda, I'm going to say he'll go to the Renault Works team.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to go with because he knows them well, doesn't he? Of course, this is all completely speculation because we don't know who's going to be doing what next year. Kimi Räikkönen may not retire from that Ferrari, even though he's hired a guy to write his book. So I think that's pretty much Kimi Räikkönen's last season. And judging by Australia, Chaz, it's fair to say he's going to go out with a bit of a flourish this year.
Well, hopefully he does. I really want to see him get a race win. I don't care where it is, just one more win. And he can retire as soon as he wants. All I want to see is him on the top step.
Just once. Exactly. Yeah, just one win this year would be absolutely brilliant.
Preferably at Spa. That'd be absolutely great. Great way to bow out.
Very much his track as well, isn't it? When you look back through his career, he's always loved that track. Or Monaco would be nice. Just kind of a little bit of vengeance for last year. Yeah. I mean, maybe. Vettel beat him fair and square. You know, if you look at it on paper, you know, he was quicker through the pit stops, but he was definitely compromised on strategy, Raikkonen there. Yeah. We'll not drop into that one just yet. Couple of news stories today. It's been really difficult today coming up with this stream. I'm not going to sit here like that's why I've gone with Red Bull, because you go looking for stories to talk about on the 1st of April and you have no idea what's true, what's false. Some of them are pretty obvious. We will address a couple of the April Fool's news stories, though, see if we can put any truth to them. And we will start off with the one that's been going and doing the rounds quite a bit, Chaz, and that is that Hamilton and Vettel have agreed to swap places, Ferrari and Mercedes. Never going to happen, is it? That's just never going to happen.
No chance in hell.
It'd be brilliant. It'd be great to see it. It would certainly add a nice dynamic to the next 12 months, having to beat each other in cars as well. I've seen a couple of people throwing calendars out there. I think Lights Out did it on Twitter. They put a very crazy calendar out. Some people saying new teams are going to come in, and I think possibly WTF1 came up with quite a good one earlier regarding basically a free-for-all on engines, which, you know, fair enough. Just, yeah, I'm not a big fan of April Fool's Day, and even less so when it comes to trying to come up with a bloody stream topic, because you just don't know what's going on, do you? So any good ones you've seen today, Chaz?
A good one I've seen that Lewis Hamilton did was fake announcing that he was going to be doing a MotoGP.
Yes, I saw that one as well. Yeah, that was a good one.
That has been a rumour.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it? Yeah, definitely.
It's rubbish.
Yeah, but it's good to see teams and drivers getting involved and having a little laugh as well. I think I've just been sent one on... That's ST, that's not an April Fool, that's an actual statement, believe it or not. Toro Rosso, yeah, never mind. We'll not get into that one. But yeah, it's a fun day, I guess, and it's nice to see the teams getting involved a little bit in that one. Do you want to start popping your questions in the chat then, guys, and we'll start to answer a few before we end the stream? Yeah. Oh, well, I'll tell you what I do need to talk about, Chaz, actually, before we go any further. The force field around overtaking that they're trying to solve for the future of Formula One, Ross Brawn and co coming out saying they're trying to get things in place now to solve it. But there's, from what I understand, there's absolutely stuff all they can do until 2021 anyway.
Yeah, because I don't think the teams will agree to it, for one, and I don't think there's actually any point, because even if they change it for, say, 2020, what's the point? Because the regulations are going to change in 2021, so you might as well just wait and, you know, have more time to get it right, because that is what we need. We need more time for them, Ross Brawn particularly, to get it right on the aero side, so we can get a lot more overtaking.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know. They talk about making all these changes, but there is literally the regulations are the regulations now. They did that in 2017, but I think they've got some more people on board to try and solve the issue. But we can't have races that are 5 overtakes after the first lap, because it is not good enough. But, of course, Bahrain should provide much better overtaking opportunities? I'm going to start taking a few questions now because it looks like we're going to get quite a few tonight. Luke Austin says, I know that Haas has a fine for the loose wheel nuts, but is there a grid penalty as well? As far as I know, Chaz, there isn't. I think it was just a $10,000 fine, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's just a fine. They will be able to qualify in their rightful positions in Bahrain, which is good because I think they'll be locking out the fourth row if the top three teams, of course, don't have any issues. And I don't think they'll be that far off Red Bull, honestly.
No, they'll have the more power, won't they, with that Ferrari engine? And I have to say, a really good common sense penalty as well, because when a driver does something wrong in a race, they get a penalty, their race is compromised. When a team do something wrong, it's often the driver that gets penalised as well. I think it's right that the team got the penalty for that, if you like. So the fines, I think that's a real proper victory for common sense in Formula One. There won't be a lot over the next 12 months, but that is one of the few $50,000 according to one comment there. So yeah, either way, it's the right call. Rennie says, hi guys, wondering what you think about my theory. Scuderia Toro Rosso being bought by Honda, Red Bull Racing, RBR, running Honda power unit in 2019, and Daniel Ricciardo stays at Red Bull. I would not be surprised if Honda bought Toro Rosso, but I think that all comes down to Red Bull. If Red Bull turn around and say, no, we don't want your engines, then Honda will buy Toro Rosso because they may as well.
Yeah, they might as well, try it on their own because they're not really going to get anywhere if they're still just an engine supplier.
JSD24, who will be the next team to follow Haas's system of buying all non-listed parts, etc.? Any new independent team would be wise to take a leaf out of Haas's book on that one, because that's a really good model to follow if you want to come in. I said in a video about it on Thursday, teams like Manor, Caterham and Co in the past couldn't survive because they couldn't afford to, whereas Haas can because they know they've got a bit of help, if you like, from Ferrari on that, not the financial side, but, not having to develop certain parts and allowing Ferrari to do that and use of the wind tunnel as well. So it makes sense. Maybe Williams could perhaps do a deal with Mercedes or something like that. Wouldn't be bad for them financially, but it might, maybe
it
not.
Would help.
Yeah.
It'd help Williams a lot if they can do that, because right now, in terms of downforce on that car, there is none.
Yanni T says, do you think it will be closer with Ferrari and Mercedes in Bahrain?
Absolutely, because I think this track suits Ferrari a lot more than it does in Australia. I think the temperatures will suit Ferrari more, and also I think the tyres will wear more, which once again suits Ferrari. And I think Mercedes will still get pole position, but I think in the race, Ferrari will either have the exact same pace as Mercedes or they'll be a tenth or two quicker. Because if you notice in Australia, Mercedes were on pole with Hamilton by, was it 8 tenths?
Yeah.
And then Hamilton was only pulling away in the race by 2 tenths. So they dropped 6 tenths to their rivals. Even though, yes, they were still pulling away, they still dropped just over half a second. And if that happens again in Bahrain and Ferrari are within half a second, then I do see Ferrari winning the race. I definitely see it.
Yeah. A couple of people actually back on the other question saying Force India could follow that model in a deal with Mercedes. That's a good point. Matthew Jordan, though, he says, how long do you think it will be until McLaren can start challenging for podiums? I don't think they're that far. I mean, it's difficult because I think the result flattered quite a few people in Australia with the virtual safety car, the Haas retirements, the problems for Verstappen. But I think as the season goes on, development comes around, they catch up from pre-season, which they themselves have said they're a little bit still on the back foot because they missed out on development because of the reliability issues. Once they've nailed all that, I could see certainly tracks like Monaco, the ones that are pretty dependent on aero, I could see them picking up podiums, but as of right now, I think they need a little bit of luck. I think, actually, to be fair, Eric Boulier himself said it'll be sort of first European race this season before we see really where McLaren are. So if you're a big McLaren fan, just hang fire. I think they are going to come good, Chaz. I don't know what you think on that.
I think they'll get better during 2018, but I think if they're going to get podiums based on genuine pace, I think you'll have to wait until next year. I think they could definitely get a podium or two this year, but in terms of it being on genuine speed of the car, I still think they're going to have to wait till next year once they have a year of experience with the Renault in the back of that McLaren.
Yeah, it's a fair point on the experience thing, because of course that's another thing with Red Bull. They've got all that experience with Renault, haven't they? So they might always have that little edge over those around them using the same power unit. So yeah, I'd like to see them get some podiums this year. If nothing else for Alonso, I think he really needs them. Although he's got quite a busy schedule, so I'm sure he'll pick up podiums and wins elsewhere if we don't get them in Formula One. Martin says, so we're going to have only factory teams and their B-spec teams. Not quite. It's difficult with Haas. Technically speaking, you could argue that. But they do build all their own aero, design all their own aero themselves. It is just the front suspension, a couple of other parts they take from Ferrari and use the wind tunnel. So I'll say something though, which probably won't go down very well. But if the only way to have a grid of 26 cars is to have a couple of effectively Toro Rossos on the grid, a Ferrari B team, a Mercedes B team, possibly a McLaren B team, I'd be down for that.
Yeah, I would. And I think Formula One's already becoming like that, because the only two teams that aren't B teams are Force India and Williams in terms of the bottom 5-6 teams.
Yeah.
Those are the only two that I see that aren't B teams and that don't look like they're going to become that in the next couple of years. But I think eventually they may have to, because it's getting difficult in terms of the finances for both of them.
It is, isn't it? That's the worry. It's the money side of things. I did see a question, I think I missed it, asking if F1's become too expensive. It's always been expensive. It just seems to be getting worse, doesn't it? But it's all this development, these new engines, etc., etc. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want a grid of 8 works teams and 8 B teams, but if it means we can get a couple of extra teams, one for Mercedes, a B team, which I think is what Manor were effectively going to be, and if Ferrari maybe keeps Sauber on there and we get somebody else in maybe to be B team to Renault or something, that'd be absolutely fine. The more cars on the grid, the better, to be honest. McLaren have never made... I think somebody has actually asked about whether McLaren could ever build their own engines. I can't see it. I can't see it, Chaz.
I don't see it, because they just had this they've never done it before, and I don't think they would be able to realistically design the car and build an engine, considering that they don't have the experience of doing that. And I think they may, if they're going to do that, they'd have to leave F1 for a year or two.
Yeah. It'd be difficult, wouldn't it? Because you couldn't... I can't imagine that a manufacturer would want to supply them an engine whilst they're trying to develop their own, because you've got all that inside information almost, haven't you? So
it would take too long for them, because they wouldn't have the experience of how to build their own engine within their own car. So then it would take longer than anticipated, and then the car would either be late or they just wouldn't have it at all. So they'd probably have to keep last year's car, for example.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I think as well the cost of it is a bit much, but yeah. Sorry, I was having a moment there. I was trying to think. The F1 nurse says, has an F1 team ever rejoined once they've left? Plenty, as far as manufacturers obviously come and go depending on how the regulations suit them and their business model at the time. But if we haven't seen teams back, we've certainly seen team names back, haven't we, Chaz?
Lotus.
Yeah, the most recent one, Team Lotus, obviously became Caterham, and then
Renault became Lotus.
And then became Renault.
4 seasons. And then Renault, yeah.
Because that's just what they do.
Yeah.
Red Bull to build their own engine. I don't see that being... I don't ever see them wanting to do that rather than not. But I think they've got the money to do it, and I'm pretty sure if they got someone like Aston Martin on board or Cosworth and did some work together, they could do. But I just can't imagine they want to more than anything.
It's a lot more possible for Red Bull to build an engine than McLaren, in my opinion, because I think Red Bull would have more resource and money to be able to do that. But again, I don't see it either, because I don't think they would want to waste loads of money and time building their own engine
No.
when they might not even know if it's going to be quick enough. It might be even worse than the power unit they currently have.
Roland says, will Bahrain have 3 DRS zones, or was that a flop? I don't know if it's an April Fool's, but I read today that they have confirmed Bahrain will have a 3rd DRS zone. It looks like that's going to be the short-term fix to the overtaking problem, which didn't work in Australia because there were no overtakes down there. Or what there almost wasn't the Hulkenberg? Was it Hulkenberg and Alonso early on? Or was it Sainz
Alonso
and
tried to go around the outside at turn 12 or 13, and
yeah, it's it didn't work, did it, in Australia? It's I don't know. I mean, it's a short-term fix to what is effectively a long-term problem. So, if it improves overtaking as much as I don't like it, it'll do for now, I suppose, as long as they commit to sorting the problem out.
Can I just ask though, where is the 3rd DRS zone? It would be good if it was the straight just before the pit straight, heading into the last corner.
Yeah, that the most logical spot for it in a way, isn't it?
Because then you'd get basically DRS, then another round, so basically double DRS, and then you get a DRS down the back straight, the short back straight.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it'll get announced, I'm sure, officially this week. So, it's race week, isn't it? It's back to back as well, Chaz. Oh, sorry, it's just dawned on me. We're heading into race week. That's picked my mood. I need some more chocolate to get some more sugar in my system. There's just not enough. Marcy says the whole track, one giant DRS zone. Well, I could see them doing that. Use your DRS when you want, basically.
I think if there are some really bad races this year, I see them doing that for 2019 and 2020 to just compensate for the lack of overtakes.
Yeah. I suppose, though, the only problem with that is if everyone's using it when they want, then it just kind of cancels itself out, doesn't it, I suppose, in a way? So,
well, what you could do is just have it in a similar way where the car behind, if he's within a second, he gets the DRS, but he can use it wherever he wants. So basically, if you're within a second of the car ahead, it doesn't matter where you are on the track. If you want to use DRS, use it. But if you're in front and you haven't got a car that's within a second of you, then you can't use it. That's the only way it would work.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just going to be chaos, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should Bahrain be interesting on strategy, asks Ben McCarthy. It should do. It's hotter, obviously. I think the tyres are softish. I'm going to have a look at that in a minute.
It's ultra soft.
McLaren have gone aggressive, haven't they, with that one? But yeah,
I will say
it needs to be 2 stops.
Yeah, it should be. The teams that select the softer tyres tend to be the teams that are trying to compensate for the lack of performance. I think Force India have also gone aggressive with their tyre selection as well. It should be 2 stops, and I just think it's going to be a race where Ferrari are going to be very strong, because I think tyre wear is going to be a very important factor, and I think Ferrari definitely have the edge on Mercedes when it comes to tyre wear, and they've had the edge on them when it comes to tyre wear for a very long time.
Yeah. Saw blistering on the Mercedes in Barcelona, didn't we, in the cold temperatures, which caused a bit of a stir at the time. But I think it has to be 2 stops in Bahrain.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why have Pirelli wasted their time making the compounds a grade softer, or half a grade softer in some cases, and then we've ended up with tyres that are basically just as durable as they were last year?
I think last year was a 2-stop, but that might have been because there was a safety car, so I'm not sure. Again, I hope it's a 2-stop. And one thing I will say, this is the only thing I find weird about Mercedes, is they always had a tyre wear problem and they've never seemed to fix it.
Do you think they rely quite a bit on the assumption that they will be the quickest, or they have got that in qualifying? So, resolving this can't follow other cars issue or the tyre issue isn't a huge deal if you're guaranteed to lock out the front row?
It depends how quick your car is. If your car is, half a second around every track quicker than everyone else, at least, then yeah, it's not going to be that much of an issue. But if it's going to be closer, say quarter of a second to 3/10, then you've got to solve that type of problem and the tyre wear problem, because it is costing them. Definitely, it cost them last year, even though of course they did win both championships, but it did cost them a lot last year, and I just don't know why they haven't fixed it. Especially since, if anyone remembers, in I think it was Barcelona in 2013, Mercedes put on probably the worst performance by a team that has locked out the front row.
Yeah.
When they all remember, Hamilton fell down to 13th because the tyre wear was so bad, and Rosberg was, I think, under pressure from De Resta, something like that.
Yeah.
I just don't know why they haven't, tried to solve that. I mean, it's better than it used to be, but it's still costing them.
It's something that needs to be sorting because, like you say, Ferrari is so much better, Red Bull as well. Sticking with Ferrari, Soccer Legend asks, how good is the Ferrari engine? It's second best on the grid, I would say, pretty confidently. It's good in a straight line. I think Lewis Hamilton said that it's a... I can't remember the word he used. It was a good Lewis Hamilton word. That's what I'm going to say, but I can't remember what he used. But basically, they're going to be a beast in Bahrain in terms of pace. But I think, yeah, I'm not going to go too much into previews, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a comfortable Mercedes win either, because it is very much power there, isn't it? But Ferrari are closer, a lot closer than they were last year, and they were pretty close last year.
Yeah.
And the race showed us that, didn't it? It's just in qualifying. Of course, that was it. Thank you. I am a person. He is so rapid. I love that word, rapid. It's just, yeah. But we saw in Australia it was close. I think it will be closer in Bahrain. It's a bit more of a relevant track as well compared to everything else we visit during the year, or the majority of which. So yeah, quite looking forward to Bahrain. I always do. We usually get a good bounce back from a pretty poor Australia. So give one last question to finish on.
I will say, in my personal opinion, I think Bahrain should be the first race of the season, because it's a more exciting track in terms of overtaking, and it's more of a sociable time for, say, people in America that Liberty Media are trying to appeal to. So I don't know why Bahrain isn't the first race, because it's gonna throw up a better race than Australia. So why not have Bahrain throw up at least a decent race, and then, people who are new to F1 can be like, oh, that was a good race, I'll watch next time, instead of Australia, where you watch and this is absolutely terrible. Why did I get up so early to watch this terrible race?
Mr. Miyagi says, what would happen if teams would have to use a new engine for every race? Would that be more or less expensive? A good question to end on, because I think there's a lot of question marks over that right now. I believe, and I'm pretty sure, he'll correct me later if I'm wrong, I'm sure, but I'm pretty sure Jonty believes as well, and a lot of people do, that it costs a damn sight more to get an engine to work for 7 races than it does to have effectively a disposable V8 or V10 popped in your car every weekend, a brand new one. So at the moment, I would say that the current system with the hybrids is a lot more expensive than, if you like, those disposable V8s.
Yeah, definitely. These hybrid power units are just so expensive. And I think if the cost becomes a really bad issue, I wouldn't be surprised if we go back to V8s just to save some teams, because it's ridiculous how expensive it is.
I think that's going to come down to what happens with the future of road cars. If everything goes electric, I can't see Formula One going all electric, because then you may as well just merge Formula E and Formula One. So it may well be that F1 decides to basically become just a show rather than a sport, or rather than trying to any kind of road relevance, which I don't think it's had for decades, but there we go. Some people disagree. I think, why not just make it entertainment, V8 engines? I don't see it. I mean, I understand all of this trying to save the planet stuff. I get that. I understand why they're trying to do it in Formula One and make it relevant. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're on track long enough. I think look, I'm not going to get into a rant about it, but it's the irony behind it, if you like, and the hypocrisy behind it. Here are our lovely hybrid engines. We're trying to be green that we've got here in our whopping great diesel lorries and trucks and wagons and whatnot, on our incredibly amazing fuel guzzling freight trains and planes and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, okay, whatever, as Lewis Hamilton drives off in his incredible supercar. You know, it's sort of, okay, you know, mixed messages. Either you're going to be green or you're going to be entertainment. And I take it back to V8s in a heartbeat. I think that's about the happy medium for me. But we'll leave it there, Chaz, before I go off on another one. You know what I'm like. You know what I'm like when we get started. So, I did want to finish on one question, though. It's from John T. Says, can I eat my Easter egg now? Yes, you can, mate. But not too much sugar, because I don't know if you've got work in the morning. So John T. will be back with us next week. So all being well, that's going to be awesome to have him back as well, isn't it, Chaz? It's been a bit too long.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say one last thing on the power units is Formula One is not about saving the planet. It's about entertainment. Simple.
Agree. Yeah. I think they have to maintain some relevance to the world, but I don't think it's, you know, they're not racing for 6 hours every day, you know.
It's an hour and a half a day.
I think over the course of a weekend, it's, what is it? So you're talking an hour and a half, 3, 4, 5. They're racing for 6.5, 7 hours a weekend, 21 times a year.
Yeah.
Not really a biggie, is it? I think it's everything around it that's wrong. Get some hybrid trucks and stuff like that, and then let the cars just have a nice big, screw it, V12 in the back of it, and see what happens. But yeah, we'll leave it there for now then, Chaz. Thank you very much for coming on, mate. It's been a pleasure as always.
Yep, thank you for having me on. Also, thank you for everyone watching as well.
Yep, and hopefully, mate, I will talk to you again very soon in regards to next week's stream, which is changing slightly, but I'll explain that to everyone in just a second. But thank you very much, mate.
No problem. Right, see ya.
Cheers, bye-bye.
Bye.
Yep, thanks to Chaz. Couple of changes coming there. As I said, if you do want to know what they are, then feel free to stick around. If you don't, I completely understand if you want to go off and eat your Easter egg or anything like that, or go and lay on the sofa and take some ibuprofen after listening to me rant for an hour. I completely understand that. But yeah, a couple of changes coming. Nothing hugely major. There will be a new schedule coming out tomorrow or Tuesday, which will explain what's going to happen in terms of content on the channel through the season. I did put one up at the start of the season, but I did a poll, as you will know, over on Twitter and on one of the videos that kind of asked you guys what you wanted to see. The votes are in for that. I've had a look at it, and I'm going to take all of your feedback into account and come up with a schedule that is final for the season. So that is coming. And as of Sunday, we will no longer be calling this Sunday Live. Well, in fact, Sunday we won't be, because of course it's race reactions next week, but there may be a second stream. We'll see how I feel about that one. But basically, Sunday Live will become the official F1 Word podcast live. What's going to happen is we will record, as we are now, just streaming, but it will be recorded as well to go up on SoundCloud, which I know there are some of you maybe listening now, commenting and already asking that question. They will be going up on SoundCloud from next week. I promise you that. It's been a long time coming. It's taken a little while to get everything in place in terms of audio, making sure that we can get the stuff recorded properly. I know long-term viewers will know that we've had some technical issues over the past, so we've been sorting all of those out. So as of next Sunday, the F1 podcast will officially be launched, if you like. So, but it's effectively going to be the same format, just under a new name, and it will be going on SoundCloud, and who knows, maybe one day in the future on iTunes. So keep an eye out for that, and also keep an eye out for that schedule in mind. I will be back on Tuesday with another video. The live stream on Wednesday is currently 50-50 at the moment, but that's because of some personal stuff. If I can get to do it, I will. It may end up just being a Q&A with you guys, but I will let you know on Twitter. So make sure you follow me on social media. Links to those are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.